Jimmy Carter's grandson tells the world that his father is in declining health. So we'll be going over what this means for public discourse, some of my thoughts on Jimmy Carter and his legacy and what he left behind. Something we've talked about actually before, but I guess I didn't realize that Jimmy Carter survived this long. They were telling me that he had like 3 weeks left to live back around New Year's, but we'll talk about that, what's happening there, and what we do with that. Tropical Storm Hillary makes headlines and makes landfall as well. And of course, when it makes landfall, the poor people of SoCal also just happen to get a magnitude 5.1 earthquake at the exact same time. So we'll go over what this means, where we can send relief to people, a little bit of the hurt and the death count. But one interesting thing about this is the fact that this actually was not a very powerful hurricane at all, and it wasn't really a powerful earthquake either, but we'll talk about that, what's happening there, and what we do with that. The UAW is close to a strike, and the culprits seem to be blaming Biden for his electric vehicle push. We'll go over some of that, what's happening there, and what we do with that. And Matt Gaetz has introduced a resolution to censure and investigate Tanya Chutkan. It is going to be all of this and more over here on Contemporary, so grab some snacks, get some friends, and get some more people in the live chat, and as always, cling to the Father and His holy name, and don't go riding on that long black train. I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary. Good evening, Edheads. Welcome to Contemporary. My name is Jay Edgar. Our show is absolutely packed tonight. There was some stuff left over because we had a fairly packed show on Friday, and then just over the weekend, so much stuff popped up here. And I mean, thankfully, for the most of it, I could get by with one or two articles that I think are going to explain most everything off this, but it's just like one thing after another happened over the weekend, and we've got a lot to talk about here. And by the way, just as a warning, I have already started to load up on things I like and things that I hate for Thursday because, well, a lot of the stuff I took off of today's stack just based on the fact that A, we're full, and B, it fits better in the things I like, things I hate category. The Queen controversy, that's definitely going to be happening on Thursday. I am sorry for the fact that we're going to have to wait 4 days for this one here, but that's a better use of my time for that, definitely. But we've got a lot to go over here today. We're going to talk about Carter. We're going to talk about Hurricane Hillary, the UAW strike. We'll see if it's happening there. Namibia may be the next place of our U.S. proxy war or direct war or occupation as well. I'll talk about why Namibia may be up on the map here. Some motion in Niger that was not able to get onto the stack today just because of what's happening over there and everything else that's happening over here. The Donald has confirmed he will not be on the debate stage, and by the way, I agree with him. I think that's a good idea. I will use the words of Viva Frei to make my point, and I will go on above and beyond what Viva Frei had to say with that one, but really honestly, as much as I want to see everybody debate, I think given the circumstances that it is in the Donald's best interest to do so, and a big crackdown on a 350% rise in license loss against gun dealers as well. So we'll be going over that and a whole bunch more over here on Contemporary. So strap yourselves in, grab some snacks, and you're not going to want to miss a minute of this, except if you're going out there to tell some more people to join in on the live chat, which, by the way, will be checked periodically throughout the night tonight, but we will also have a big dedicated live chat segment at the end of the night. So if I don't get to your live chat at the beginning, stick around to the end of the show and I'll be going over it in order, trying to remember what it was that you guys were saying at the time and what you guys meant where we're going here. So that's what we got for that. Let's get into our news. Let's get started with the finance for the day. Before we do, make sure you guys go check out great programming such as the Daily Ignoramus, The Breakdown with Birkenhoff, the R-Rated Conservative, The Porch Boys, Tweets by Brit, Mr. Behavior, the No Gimmicks Podcast, A Silent Caster, Clarnwell Chronicles with Papa Palpatine, and Overruled with KTZed. Go check out all that great programming as we aim to bring you a better news and culture experience from the common man, for the common man, that's right. Stop getting your news and culture from people who hate you and wear suits that cost more than your houses. Get your news and culture from people who are just like you. And with all of that, let's get down into it for the day, and we're going to start with the Dow. The Dow erased all the massive gains that it had on Friday. All 28 points that it gained on Friday, it lost today. I mean, it lost a lot more, but it was able to claw its way back before descending right at the end of trading today, losing 36.97 points on the day, or 0.11% on the day. That is down to 463.69 points on the day, with a drop down below 34.3 at the intraday low. So we will see what's happening with that and what is driving the markets downward, even if it is ever so slightly, and what happens with this on Bitcoin. For the day, your Bitcoin is down $58 and 10 US cents, about 0.25% to $26,131 and 20 US cents. It is still starting to waver into that on sale territory. If we come out over the weekend, we see a very, very steady over the weekend here, starting on Friday, where it took a bit of a tumble and then just kind of stayed within a short range going throughout the weekend and just kind of sitting there steady and steady and steady and steady. So, I mean, after the big loss that we had over the week last week, your 5-day is down $2,569 and 30 US cents. But as far as just over the weekend, it's barely down. It barely moved. So steady is good in any financial market, so that's what we see coming off of that. Your gas prices, however, that is some good news, especially if your market follows the patterns that we see in the Madison area from over the weekend here. Remember, we were still seeing 360 and 370 on the west side, but 340 still being the standard on the east side. Well, the west side caught up. For the most part, we still see a 360 over there and a 370, but we see 350s as the regular over on the west side, 340 still the regular on the east side, with the Isthmus showing 360 at the BP and 346 at the Amoco. So some of that is starting to come down. Check your local listings for your local prices, but use this as a benchmark to see what kind of a pattern you should expect around your local area and fill up as applicable. This is your gas report, of course. Our finance report today coming from CNBC. NASDAQ snaps 4-day losing streak. Tech shares rise despite higher yields from Pia Singh and Sarah Min. The NASDAQ snapped a 4-day losing streak on Monday, even as Treasury yields reached levels not seen in over a decade. The tech-heavy index gained 1.6% to close at 13,497.59, its biggest one-day advantage since July 28th, when it rallied 1.9%. The S&P gained 0.69 to close at 43,99.77. The Dow fell 0.11 to 34,463.69. Palo Alto rallied 14.5% on stronger than expected earnings, and Nvidia popped 8.3% out of its earnings report due on Wednesday. Tesla and Meta climbed 7% and 2.4% respectively. The S&P tech sector gained 2.26% on Monday. Those moves come even as the benchmark 10-year yield hit a high of 4.34%, reaching its highest level since November of 2007. Yields, which rise when bond prices fall, are typically bad for the tech and other growth stocks as they lessen the value of the promised future earnings. That made the day's tech gains notable. I think the path of least resistance is the momentum that you're seeing coming into this week, said Jeff Schulze, head of the economic and market strategy at ClearBridge Investments. The 10-year Treasury yield continues to rise here, and though you did not see positive impulse for the markets and in particular cyclicals, I think ultimately the 10-year yield is going to weigh on valuations and put more downward pressure on the markets as the week develops. Well, we'll see. I think the dip that you saw last week was the beginning of more to come, said David Bianco, the New York-based Chief Investment Officer at DWS Group Americas. The bond market is putting up a really attractive alternative to equity investors unless someone believes that the S&P is going to go from the no earnings growth it's been stuck in for about 2 years now to really strong earnings growth. So that's what we have going on here. Reminder that there's going to be an address at the Federal Reserve Chair from Jerome Powell in Jack Hole, Wyoming. That is, of course, Jackson Hole, but I mean, because of the Federal Reserve's strong ties to the area, I have colloquially, let's try that again, begun to call this place Jack Hole because of all the jackholes that gather around there. Our layoffs report today coming from the Silicon Valley Business Journal. Intel is laying off 226 people in Silicon Valley, dozens more than expected. The semiconductor giant is laying off workers in San Jose and its Santa Clara headquarters. And because we're not subscribers, that's all we get for this one here. Troy Wolverton making the report. And I mean, we're seeing more tech. There's more structuring. Again, as I always say, I'm sure this is not going to be engineers. This is going to be middle management. The people who manage the engineers. So, I mean, many of them can either work from home or maybe don't need to go see an HR agent for every little thing, of course. And we'll see what happens with this and where this goes. All right, let's talk Jimmy Carter. From the USA Today. Jimmy and Rosalind Carter's grandson says it's clear they are in the final chapter. Says Marina Pitovsky. Former President Jimmy Carter and former First Lady Rosalind Carter's grandson opened up about the couple and their health in an interview and said it's clear that we're in the final chapter. Josh Carter told People that his family and caregivers are always at the couple's longtime home in Plains, Georgia to keep them company. The Carter Center announced earlier this year that the former president was entering hospice care. In May, the Carter family revealed the former First Lady was diagnosed with dementia. Hospice is provided to patients who choose to no longer receive treatment for a terminal illness and have a life expectancy of 6 months or less, according to the National Institutes of Health, National Institute on Aging. Dementia describes symptoms that generally include loss of memory and thinking and social abilities that can affect everyday activities. You know, like the president. The couple's grandson told People that the former president is still fully Jimmy Carter. He's just tired, and I mean, he's almost 99 years old. But he fully understands how many well wishes he's received and has felt the love. He added that Rosalind Carter, 96, understands that she has dementia, and she signed off on the statement confirming her condition. She still knows who we are for the most part, that we're family, he said, and added, my grandmother is still able to form new memories. Josh Carter also reflected on the couple's 77-year marriage. He said that it has to be difficult for Jimmy to see his wife lose memories, but on the other hand, they've experienced everything that you can together. I think the beautiful thing is that they are still together. They're still holding hands. It's just amazing, he said. Jimmy and Rosalind are the longest married presidential couple in American history. The best thing I ever did was marry Rosalind, Carter said in a C-SPAN interview at the Carter Center in 2015. That is the pinnacle of my life. And what a sweet, sweet message for this. Now, we talked about this, and I talked about this back when Jimmy Carter was first put into hospice care. Earlier on this year. And as a Democrat, I actually really have no problem with Jimmy Carter. As far as his presidency, he was passable. I mean, there's nothing to write home about. Some of the failures that he had and some of the problems that he had with this, number one, came from conflicts that he had with the Speaker of the House at the time, with world leaders who were legitimately coming back and ganging up on Carter at the time. So the failures and the problems that he had in his presidency were not his fault. However, Carter was one of those where he proved the the old adage that the presidency is a lightning rod. So whenever there's negative coverage, it all goes right in onto the one man who's up at the top and the buck stops here. And we've seen this in our late lifetimes too. I mean, Carter lost the presidency before I was born. And I think I'm older than most people who watch this program. But really realistically, where Jimmy Carter shone was post-presidency. Carter was one of the biggest advocates for Habitat for Humanity. He went up and built houses literally into his 90s. I think they said that the last house that he participated physically on, he was like 96. So this is a person who got out of the presidency and just went into the private sector for private charity. Instead of letting the government go out and be the charity and take the taxes and do that to help lift people up, he got out there and lifted people up. And I've always been impressed by Jimmy Carter for this. I've always been impressed by Jimmy Carter for this. Terrible president, great man. Great human being, absolutely fantastic human being. And the world benefited for the fact that Jimmy Carter was out there. And, you know, honestly, he had that presidential pension, which I know he put a lot of that into charity as well. So, absolutely good on Jimmy Carter. And again, I didn't expect that he was still alive. I thought that he had passed a while ago because they said that it was only going to be like 2 or 3 weeks when they put him in a hospice care. And I mean, what was that, March? It's now August? So he's somehow still kicking. And I think he's going to outlive where they said 6 months for his hospice care too, because, I mean, realistically, when you think about it, we may not lose Jimmy Carter until the very, very last guinea worm in existence is eradicated. If you want to keep Jimmy Carter alive forever, just keep a guinea worm alive in a jar somewhere. And until he sees that population extinct, he will live forever. Jimmy Carter, folks. All right. Let's talk about Hurricane Hillary. Now, one of the things that we've been noticing here is Hurricane Hillary was not as strong of a storm as a lot of people thought it was going to be. Now, having any kind of tropical storm and torrential rainfall hit California is going to be devastating no matter what, because California has been in a drought for 2 decades. And when you have ground that is that moisture deprived, it sometimes becomes hydrophobic, which means the water hits there and it doesn't necessarily absorb in the ground. It just kind of bounces off and flows down into the bottoms of places, and it will eventually absorb into the ground. And the rainfall, plus all the massive blizzards and the snowfall that they had out in SoCal this past year, means that their reservoirs are going to get filled, but not in a way that anybody really anticipated with this. But also, given the fact, there are people that are saying that Russian interference is to blame for Hurricane Hillary's poor performance when it hit groundfall. Come on, laugh. But let's talk about what's happening here. From NBC News, California officials warn worst of the storm has yet to come as Hillary makes landfall. So this is midday Sunday, I believe, when this one came out. Yes, updated August 21st, 2023 at 12:45 a.m. So no, not midday Sunday. Wee hours of the morning today. Tropical Storm Hillary slammed Southern California with a deluge of rainfall, flooding roadways and breaking records in parts of the region on Sunday as it made its historic arrival. Gavin Newsom declared a state of emergency for much of SoCal, with flash flood warnings in place until the early hours of Monday. The National Weather Service has warned of record-breaking rainfall and possible life-threatening impacts. By Sunday evening, several records for daily rainfall amounts had already been broken in the LA area, the Weather Service said. Once a Category 4 hurricane, Hillary was downgraded to a tropical depression before reaching California. It was the first tropical storm to hit SoCal since 1939. The storm made landfall on Sunday on the Baja California peninsula of Mexico. One person drowned on Saturday in the Mexican town of Santa Rosalia on the peninsula's eastern coast after a vehicle was swept away in the overflowing stream. F in the chat. But this is the previous here, so now we've got updates. Now that everything has passed through, we'll talk a bit about what's happening with this. But let's talk about the HurriQuake before we do that. There is some continuing coverage for this one, but this is from NBC4 out of Los Angeles. Magnitude 5.1 earthquake in Ventura County shakes parts of SoCal. Yeah. How pissed do you have to have made God? And I mean, he did give you divine forgiveness over the fact that this did not hit LA as a Category 4 hurricane. Because legitimately there might not be in LA at that point, but you get the tropical depression and more rainfall than you have had in many of your lives. And then at the exact same time, as if by a major coincidence, you get a magnitude 5.1 earthquake at the same time. This is from Jonathan Lloyd. Mother Nature dealt SoCal a 1-2 punch on Sunday. By the way, I hope nobody looked west, southwest, depending on where you are, while the storm was going, because I would hate to lose a large part of my audience because they become pillars of salt. Mother Nature dealt Southern California a 1-2 punch Sunday when an earthquake in Ventura County triggered widespread shaking on the same day as the region was drenched by its first tropical storm in decades. The magnitude 5.1 earthquake at 2:41 p.m. startled Southern Californians who were already braced for the remnant Hurricane Hillary, which already brought hours of steady rain during the region's driest month of the year. There were at least dozens of aftershocks of magnitude 3.0 or greater. The earthquake was centered around 4 miles south of Ojai, about 80 miles northwest of Los Angeles. Shaking was reported in Ventura, Camarillo, Oxnard, Newbury Park, Thousand Oaks, Simi Valley, Santa Barbara, parts of LA's San Fernando Valley, Malibu, Porter Ranch, Manhattan Beach, and other locations. Should reach one of my coworkers is from Manhattan Beach originally. I know he's still got family over there. I should reach out to him and say, hey, is your family okay? At Tres Hermanas restaurant in Ojai, security camera video captured images and the jarring sound of shaking. Ojai, a small scenic community on the edge of Los Padres National Forest, about 12 miles north of Ventura, has a vibrant downtown village area that features art galleries, shops, and bars. There were no immediate reports of significant damage. The Ventura County Sheriff's Department conducted an aerial survey of Lake Casitas Dam, Matalija. There we go. You know, you see a name like that, and I mean, you see M-A-T-I-L, and your mind just says Matilda right away. And the city of Ojai and found no damage. In LA, the city fire department went into earthquake operations mode with all 106 neighborhood fire stations conducting surveys for damage. This location is interesting to have there, said seismologist Dr. Lucy Jones. This is the first time we've had a 5 since 1932 in exactly this location, and even within the Ventura Basin. A magnitude 5.1 was reported in 41, west of Sunday's quake, Jones said. Some of the 1994 Northridge earthquake aftershocks were east of the location. Yeah, them Northridge girls, they will shake up your life, I'll tell you that. Jones said more aftershocks are likely in the coming days. The hashtag HurriQuake quickly began trending on X following the early afternoon quake. So, again, you just had a hurricane go through, so I don't see a lot of damage or even something that would be noticeable because, I mean, the rain, the torrential rain and the wind that came with that probably took the vast majority of the damage, but again, you're sitting up at that point where you get something like this and something else that happens after that, and I mean, I'm realistically wondering if they're going to be locusts next. Hey, Californians, are you at all skilled in spreading blood over your door frames? You might want to do that just a little bit. All right. We've got one from space.com. Where's Mr. Scott when you need him? Because I know he would be super into this one here. Watch Hurricane Hillary hit California hours after earthquake in the satellite video. Now, there's no sound in this video, but I mean, you can see the satellite imaging in the clouds, and they'll flip it map-wise. That's, I mean, to look up at something like that, that's got to be somewhat intense.
On this day.
No, we're not watching that. But yeah, just, I mean, that's intense to come back and see. And again, I mean, there has not been a lot of rain in this region for quite a while. Let's see, what do we have over here? Mogwai says it's Muted Monday in song 2. That was a good song that I chose today. Jimmy Carter is still in better health than Papa Joe. Yes, he is. Hurricane Hillary was a powerful storm over the water, but the mountains tore it up. Giggity. Leaving it as a rain event, oddly enough, that marked the first time Hillary was tore up since smoking pot in college. Oh! Burn! Mogwai says, I was born in Reagan's first term and remember his speech after the Challenger exploded. I'm old as F. If you were born in Reagan's first term, you're probably just slightly older than me. Because I was also technically born in Reagan's first term, but I was 6 months shy of Election Day. 7 months shy of Election Day. I was born in '84. What an ironic year for a person who analyzes politics, especially the way politics is becoming, to be born in 1984. I told my friend last night while I was on the phone with her that I told her about that and found out that she's never read 1984. Which technically neither have I. I've started it, but I've never finished it. But I've at least heard of it. She hadn't even heard of that book. Like, really? So that's going to be an introduction that's going to be made here pretty quick. Mogwai says, for 1 cup of Starbucks, you can help a millionaire rebuild their Beverly Hills mansion. Hurricane and an earthquake at the same time. That mother effer that is tap dancing on the prehistoric butterflies can stop now. Well, technically that mother effer that's been tap dancing on the prehistoric butterflies stopped millions of years ago. Either that or they keep going back in time to fix something and we keep getting things more effed up than the platypus. Is that platypus a secret agent? Does it wear a fedora? From ABC 7 News out of San Francisco, Tropical Storm Hillary headlines after flight delays, earthquakes, and flooding in California on Sunday, from Tim Johns. A historic storm is unfolding Sunday night in Southern California. After days of anticipation, Tropical Storm Hillary made landfall across several counties. Aerial video from our sister station, ABC7 LA, showed flooded streets and waterways throughout the city of Angels. For them, the challenge is, of course, they're in an unknown country, meaning it's not familiar to them, said Tracy Chin. Chin is the program manager for FEMA's California Task Force 4, rather. She says the Oakland Fire Department has sent a team down to Riverside to help local first responders. We have sponsored one Swiftwater Type 1 team, which includes 16 personnel and boats and their transportation to go and respond to anything that the local agency has for us, Chin said. And it wasn't just Hillary's impacts crews were dealing with either. Early on Sunday, a 5.1 magnitude earthquake also struck in Ventura County. It's a combination of a whole bunch of weird things happening all at the same time, but we're used to that in the state of California. We do a lot of juggling, said retired fire chief from the Menlo Park Fire District, Harold Schapel-Human. The storm is also causing problems in the Bay Area at Oakland Airport. Dozens of flights to SoCal were canceled on Sunday. Those delays are being felt across the Bay Area at SFO 2. There were many passengers who were left wondering when they might be able to take off. I was afraid of this, but I was hoping we would prevail, said Holly Hale. I mean, rent a car. I understand that it's a long way across California, but rent a car. Fingers crossed. We hope that we can make it there tonight, but we'll see, said Zelia Patani. Well, I hope they get to their destination too. And if you are looking to help out with the charities, go back to the All tab for just a minute. Nope, I'm sorry, wrong one. We've got, of course, the Catholic Relief Services. If you would like to put in for that, Save the Children. It's kind of cliche. They're not really giving a lot of charities that are out here. Instead, I mean, if you put out in charities for Hurricane Hillary, you're getting a lot of news. FEMA, of course, is out there. So, if you guys want to look into charities for this, definitely. And I understand, by the way, that our charity bucks are probably getting spread a little bit thin at this point because, I mean, we just finished off wildfire in Maui, which we'll be talking about, I think, a little bit later on in the program. We're just finishing off on another hurricane in Florida. I mean, there have been natural disasters left and right. And especially teetering on a recession, we're also sitting at a point where a lot of people didn't have a lot of savings when the natural disaster hit. So there's that avenue to things as well. But that's what they have for that. Yes, Mogwai, those poor millionaires. But if you do want to help out the people out there, there are ways to do so, and I will be throwing a little bit of money at them as well. And that's what we have here. Some foreign news for us here. Possibly our next foreign war. Coming up here. From Upstream. Apparently I can't read that one because of no subscription. So I'll read this one instead. Namibia plans $2.1 billion port expansion for oil developments because, well, they just found a, what's the technical term? A metric butt ton of oil under Namibia. Which, by the way, for a reminder, is in southern Africa, right next to South Africa. Get the map up here. We'll have a look at where that's at. By the way, Google Maps is defaulted to the globe and it's kind of annoying. But yep, right here, what you're seeing here, if you're watching on the main platforms, if you are watching on Instagram or listening back on the audio platform, you unfortunately can't see what we're seeing on the screen on the rest of the platforms. But, I mean, you've got Namibia right there next to Botswana and South Africa, and that is going to be our very next foreign theater because of all the metric butt ton of oil that they found underneath the place. And now they're looking to go and enter the global marketplace of that. And, well, the countries that make their money off that oil are not going to be real happy with that. I can tell you that right off the bat. But let's read from Q Captain. Kaula Nhongo. Namibia is seeking private investment for a $40 billion Namibian dollar, or about $2.1 billion US dollar port infrastructure expansion after significant oil discoveries made offshore in the southern African nation. The project in Walvis Bay and Lüderitz involves the construction of new berths and quay walls. To support drilling services, Namibian Ports Authority Chief Executive Officer Andrew Kanemi said in an interview with Windhoek, the capital, "We're hoping to commence with the operation in the last quarter of next year, which we will take about 3 years at most." Total Energies Southeast and Shell plc are appraising recent oil finds that could hold an estimated 7 billion barrels of oil equivalent. According to consultant Wood Mackenzie, activity offshore in the country has accounted for 13% of rigs working in African waters, bolstering its status as an exploration hotspot. Namibia could reach its first crude production as early as 2029. State oil company KTZed, neighboring Angola, is Africa's second biggest oil producer. So again, I remind you that in the very near future, especially with a Biden in charge, there's going to suddenly be a coup in Namibia. Their government's going to be overthrown mysteriously, and the rebels are going to get some funding from somewhere that nobody in the world knows, and they're going to get weapons, and suddenly they're going to overpower the government of Namibia, and, well, somebody from the West is just going to have to install a government in there. Because we can't let these people go uncovered, especially with all this wonderful economy they're about to build. But that'll be coming up for the near future. Yeah, Angola, they say, is the biggest producer at this point, so that might even pop off, especially if Namibia manages to outperform Angola. We'll see. Speaking of things that run with oil, from WXYZ Detroit. That is an ABC 7 affiliate. UAW rally strike vote expected this week. Now, we haven't seen a lot of news on this here, but it does appear that the United Auto Workers Union, which covers all three of the big three, is set to go back out and go on strike, possibly because of the insistence that they focus on electric vehicles. From Peter Maxwell. Contract negotiations are still ongoing between the UAW and Detroit's Big Three. Now, I will say that there's not a whole lot that you need to worry about this, because if it does look like this is going to get threatening, the Biden admin is just going to come in and break up the union and break up the strike. Excuse me. This week, the UAW is planning to hold strike authorization vote. The results are expected by Thursday. The current contract between the union and the automakers expires on September 14th, just 24 days away on Sunday. UAW President Shawn Fain held a rally outside the UAW Region 1 Pavilion in Warren. Hundreds of union workers showed up demanding changes when it comes to their contract. Well, the U.S. is already doing paid. How long till the Bush twins are presidential eligible? They already are, because they're older than I am. I think they're like a year or two older than me. And I'm presidentially eligible. You're 35. I think the Bush twins were born in '82, if I remember correctly. Kiata Shanklin, team leader at the quality department at Stellantis Detroit assembly plant, said she makes the top wage there and still struggles to pay bills while sometimes working 7 days a week. I mean, when I started getting into that, I started reducing some of my bills. I get what you're saying, and you're a union worker, so you're entitled to whatever it is that you want, apparently. But, yeah, when I started getting into that situation, I started cutting some of my bills. It doesn't even equate to what we miss out on with our families, she said. More paid time off is one of the 10 concessions the UAW is demanding, along with a 32-hour work week, a double-digit pay increase of more than 40% pension for all workers, and ending wage tiers. That's why we gave them a preview of our demands, so they know what the membership expects, Fain said. He spoke at the rally and slammed the Big Three, which made record profits in the last year. In the first half of 23, they made a combined $21 billion in total profits. In a recent statement, both GM and Stellantis have referenced that they are working with the UAW members and are aware of the economic impacts of these jobs. Ford released a statement saying in part, "We look forward to working with the UAW on creative solutions during this time when our dramatically changing industry needs skilled and competitive workforce more than ever." There's no excuse. And at the end of this, if we get to the 14th and they haven't delivered, then we gotta do what we gotta do, Fain said. The UAW has said it has $825 million in the strike fund and has raised strike pay to $500 per week, which is going to get really uncomfortable for a lot of people in a hurry, because I've seen what some of these union members are making and adjusted to it for inflation. Remember, my dad was a union worker. So just thinking, and I don't know exactly what my dad made, but I've got a ballpark general idea, and then when you adjust that to inflation, $500 a week is not going to go very far if they're already complaining about being able to pay their bills, just so you know. And of course, the Biden admin's just going to come in and break up the union and tell them to take what they can get anyway. And part of that is because the looming strike could cost the U.S. economy more than $5 billion in just 10 days, from Megan Henney. By the way, you notice, just on a little bit of an observation here, as to who really gives a flying fuck about what. The writer's strike is still going on. And the SAG-AFTRA strike is still going on. And I don't know that I've heard anybody talk about that short of a couple days after it went into place. It's still going on. Because I follow some SAG-AFTRA actors and actresses who are still absolutely thrilled to come out and post their pictures in the union rallies and the strike rallies and everything else. Nobody cares. Because realistically, if they're all on strike, this doesn't affect the rest of the country. If these guys go on strike, I mean, it's not going to be as bad as like if UPS or the trains went on strike, definitely, but it's going to hurt. I can say that. And that's part of the reason, by the way, the Biden admin is going to come in and probably break this one up too. If the UAW decides to strike against the Big Three Detroit automakers when the current contract expires next month, it could cost the U.S. economy more than $5 billion, according to a new analysis from the Anderson Economic Group, a Michigan-based think tank that specializes in the economic impact of labor strikes. The report estimates that economic losses from a 10-day work stoppage could cost more than $5.6 billion. And I mean, it's odd enough that we have one of these popping off and happening like every week at this point. I don't know if you've noticed this or not, but it seems like we're always talking about a strike while a Democrat is president, who is, by the way, supposed to be in the party of the union. Even a short strike would impact economies throughout Michigan and across the nation, said Patrick Anderson, CEO of the Anderson Economic Group. That figure includes manufacturer loss of $989 million and lost direct wages of $859 million. It does not take into consideration strike pay, unemployment benefits, unemployment taxes, income taxes, government spending, or settlement bonuses. Negotiations between UPS and the Teamsters stalled last week as the two sides remained at odds over the terms of the new contract, raising the odds of a strike at the beginning of August. Oh. See, they said that was all over, but it does seem that that's still possibly ongoing. Let me just check the date on this article to make sure that this isn't... No, this is from yesterday, so... that might still go through too yet. The union's current contract with GM, Ford, and Stellantis, the maker of Chrysler and Jeep, expires on September 14th. About 146,000 UAW workers are set to vote next week on whether to authorize a strike against the Detroit automakers. UAW President Shawn Fain urged members to authorize a strike. Facebook Live appearance this week. If we want to make progress at the bargaining table, we need to show the companies that it's not just talk, Fain said. The main point of contention between the two sides is higher pay, with Fain saying the union will seek more than 40% general pay raises for rank-and-file members over 4 years, making all temporary workers at the automakers permanent. Cost of living adjustments, increases in pension benefits for current retirees, and restoring pensions for new hires, among other benefits, which, by the way, is going to drive the cost of vehicles up. Just so you know, and we're sitting in a point right now where nobody's ready to go back out and pay the prices that are already on the vehicles. Fain called the demands the most audacious and ambitious list of proposals they've seen in decades. Negotiations appear to have made little headway so far, with automakers noting they're facing a multi-billion-dollar shift to electric vehicles, which we'll be talking about in just a second. But yeah, if you don't have vehicles on the lot, and it's not just a matter of who has the money to go out and buy a new vehicle and who does and who doesn't have that kind of money, you still want to have something out there for people to buy in case something breaks down. And the UAW also makes the parts to repair the vehicles that are on the road today already. Those costs are going to go up, by the way. So it's a cycle. Definitely something that I'm going to be paying attention to, but that's what we see for that. And Axios reporting on the EV push. Chances of a costly auto worker strike extra high amid Biden's EV push, from Joanne Muller. A potential strike by U.S. auto workers in September would be a high-stakes problem for President Biden, who's trying to balance his push for EVs with his self-description as the most pro-union president ever, which he lost when he literally went into the rail union and said, "You will not strike, you will go to work, or I will make it illegal for you to strike." Nobody believes Biden is the most pro-union president ever. The UAW worries that EV factories won't employ as many people as traditional plants, and that new battery factories spurred by the president's tax incentives will pay lower wages. In addition to the political implications, a work stoppage by the nearly 150,000 UAW workers at GM, Ford, and Stellantis would result in the economic loss of more than $5 billion over 10 days, according to the Anderson Economic Group. So, that is an important thing to look at too. Like, these people made X amount of money to make a certain kind of vehicle. But a lot of these battery factories are either popping up in places that have no union, therefore they don't have representation by the UAW, or they're starting off at lower wage and lower pay. Because apparently there's less labor that goes into this here. So It's an interesting place to see. We'll continue to watch this and see where this goes, but definitely something to watch. Let's grab some Maui news, including some conspiracy news as well. I put that on there for a reason. From Fox Weather. As Maui students return to school, many children among the 850 missing after deadly fires. From Emily Speck. Classrooms on Maui will have empty seats as students begin returning to school nearly 2 weeks after the deadly brush fires broke out, consuming entire communities on the Hawaiian island. The brush fires broke out on August 8th during the day, tearing apart families. The fires destroyed about 2,200 homes, displacing an estimated 4,500 people. President Brandon and First Lady Jill are expected to arrive in Maui on Monday and meet with families to see the destruction of Lahaina firsthand. The exact number of people missing after the fires is still changing. Governor Green told reporters over the weekend it's possible that there will be many children among the unaccounted for. I think I'm doing that backwards. I think I'm supposed to go... Well, number one, I think I'm supposed to use my left hand, and I think I'm supposed to go... No. Is it left to right or right to left? Somebody that's Catholic. Explain that one to me. I'm Lutheran. We don't do that 1,000 times a day, and we don't do that amongst each other. It's typically the minister that does that for us. Maui County Mayor Richard Bisson said in a video that 850 names are on a list of missing persons. Bisson said the number of missing people dropped from 1,000 people after lists from the FBI, Red Cross, and Maui Police were combined. Heading into the new week, the Olinda fire is 85% contained at 1,081 acres. The Kula fire is 85% contained at 202 acres. And the Lahaina fire is 90% contained with 2,170 acres burned. The Pulehi Kihai fire was contained on August 12th. I'm Methodist. We only do it when the beer spills. Well, there's a methodology to it, apparently. What is the method of Methodism? I'm going to, on my new talk show, I'm going to sit down with a Methodist and figure out what the method is. By the way, I've been to a Methodist church. It's not that different from what I grew up in the Lutheran church, oddly enough. Write it down. I'm having a Methodist on. Maybe I'll have a Methodist pastor. I mean, this is Wisconsin. It's not going to be that hard to find one. A group of residents filed a suit on Friday against Hawaiian Electric Industries, Hawaiian Electric Company, Hawaii Electric Light Company, and Maui Electric Company, alleging the companies contributed to the Lahaina fire when they did not cut power during hazardous fire weather. The lawsuit alleges that the fire was started when electrical infrastructure and the power lines owned by these companies came into contact with vegetation in the surrounding areas, law firm Morgan & Morgan said. Well, I mean, it's the most common explanation. We'll see what the lawyers come out with, but I mean, there are other people that have questions about this. From CBS News, many Lahaina wildfire victims may be children, Governor says, from Lee Cohen. More than 100 people were killed in the Lahaina wildfire and hundreds more remain missing, and it's possible that many of the victims are children who were at home while schools were closed, Governor Green told Face the Nation on Sunday. Hawaii officials said on Monday that 850 people are still missing in Maui in the wake of wildfires that destroyed historic Lahaina and other areas. So far, just 27 of the 114 confirmed victims have been identified. According to Hawaii State Department of Education, the day the fire ripped through Lahaina was students' first day back at school. Lahaina Luna High School, however, was closed that day because of a power outage caused by the high winds. The local intermediate and elementary schools were scheduled to bring students back on August 9th. Stories have started pouring in of children who were lost in the flames. Teenager Kiero Fuentes is enjoying his last day of summer vacation, hanging out at his Lahaina home when fire swept through. His adoptive mother, Luz Vargas, was working 5 miles away. She and her husband tried to get home to Fuentes as soon as they learned of the fire, but got stuck in traffic. When she got out of the car to run to the house, she faced a police barricade. Later, after running past officers, first responders told her the area had been cleared and no one was there. When they were finally allowed to go to their house 2 days later, she found the body of their 14-year-old son hugging the family's dead dog. He was just days away from celebrating his 15th birthday. Oh my God. Governor Green said Sunday he wished sirens would have alerted residents in Maui to evacuate as wildfires quickly spread through Lahaina. Yeah, there's a lot of tinfoil that goes on with this one here, and I'm going to be completely honest with you. I don't blame people for putting on the tinfoil for this one, because there really seemed like there was a lot that went wrong that made this fire be as devastating as it could. Let's listen to the Maui mayor talking about this for just a moment. Reporter, how many children are missing, Maui mayor? I guess we can end this right now if you want.
I don't know.
Yes, you do. How many children are missing? You know.
I knew the answer to that. I would be happy to answer that.
You have no estimate as to how many children are missing?
I guess we can end this right now if you guys want. Sorry.
This is one of the biggest questions that the people of Lahaina have, but you don't want to answer it.
It always takes one or two to ruin it for everybody.
Please, this is our first one. This is our only
Well, we
opportunity.
could say that about you. You ruined it for everyone.
You're welcome to say it. You're the media. You can say whatever you want.
You're a disaster.
All right. Okay.
You've been the worst mayor we could possibly imagine.
You won't even wait.
Oh, why don't you tell us how you really
Respect
feel?
what? This is the most dismal response we've ever had.
You won't wait for your turn. You want to shout over these guys that are legitimate.
Why don't you give them the real answers then? Give them the real answers.
That's not his question.
Let him.
Yeah. You can go. Yeah.
Oh,
Sorry. I don't know. I wish
yes,
I knew
you
the answer.
do.
And that's got to be an awful position to be in, too, given where he's at right now. And having to come back and try to explain what's happening with this. And on top of this all now, and we're going to discuss, not from a Green Check Verified article, but still some of the tinfoil that's going with this. From SK Pop. This is not a Green Check Verified outlet, by the way, and this is one of the few times where I'm not going to be using one of those. Typically, I try to stay with them, but the reason that I'm talking with this one is to talk about the cultural impact of this and what people are actually talking about. SK Pop reports he got defensive. He knows Maui missing children trafficking conspiracy goes viral amid rising death toll from Aaron Anthony. The Maui wildfire continues to leave behind a trail of disaster, turmoil, and pain as the death toll continues to rise. So far, fires have caused the deaths of 114 individuals, most of whom are yet to be identified. About 1,000 people are also currently missing in Maui. However, a harrowing interview with the Maui mayor, Richard Bisson, showcased a clash between him and journalists who wanted to know the exact number of potentially missing children. Bisson did not seem to cooperate, and the interview left netizens stunned, as it also resulted in allegations of child trafficking and accusations of incompetence being leveled against Bisson and the government. Well, incompetence against government, I mean, that's not the headline, that's the name of the paper. Several netizens reacted to I'm Meme Zero's tweet about the situation and shared thoughts on the same. Weircat says he got defensive, he knows. The video of reporters pressing Bisson for answers went viral on social media. I don't know, said the mayor when asked how many children are currently missing. After reporters asked him if he really did not have an estimate how many kids were missing, the mayor seemingly ignored the question by saying, I guess we can end this right now. On being bombarded with more questions about the topic, he further stated, it always takes one or two to ruin it for everybody. During the interview, one of the reporters countered Richard Bisson by saying that the same could be said about him. They doubled down by stating the mayor had been a disaster. The reporter could be heard exclaiming, You've been the worst mayor we could possibly imagine." Bisson asked the reporters why they weren't waiting for their turn, and one of them responded by asking him why he wasn't giving them the right answers. Independent journalist Nick Sortor was one of the reporters who questioned the mayor. On August 19th, he took to social media and claimed that he was being constantly harassed in Maui because of his questions. He also mentioned that he was being stalked and sent death threats. I'm sure he wasn't. But, I mean, with everything that's been happening over the past few years, and how many people are being caught with child trafficking, it's a legitimate question to ask. And I'm not going to come out and pretend that I know whether or not there's actual child trafficking going on or not. But what I will say is, it's a legitimate question that you should be asking. As far as Mayor Bisson goes, look, the guy is overseeing probably one of the worst disasters anybody in his position will ever have to see, and they are living in a hurricane-prone island. And this is still one of the worst disasters he's ever going to have to oversee, and any mayor of Maui is ever going to have to oversee. So if he doesn't have all the facts and statistics in front of him, I'm not actually that mad at him. I hope that he does find out at some point, but I'm not actually that mad at him for doing this. But that is what our culture is saying for this. Let's move back over onto the mainland and talk about the Donald. Yay. From the New York Post, Matt Gaetz introduced resolution to censure judge in Trump case. Blatant political bias. From Victor Nava, Matt Gaetz announced Friday he will introduce a measure to censure and investigate District Judge Tanya Chutkan, who was presiding over former President Trump's 2020 election interference case in D.C. Trump has derided Chutkan, an appointee of former President Obama, as very biased and unfair, and has demanded the jurist recuse herself from the case, citing her handling of several trials related to supporters of his who stormed the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. Gaetz' resolution to censure, condemn, and investigate the 61-year-old Jamaican board judge accuses her of engaging in partisan commentary on and off the bench that calls into question her fitness as a judge and claims that Chutkan is openly biased against Trump. Oh look, it's deeply concerning that a U.S. District Court judge would exhibit such a blatant political bias from the bench, the Florida lawmaker said in a statement on Friday. Judge Chutkan's extreme sentencing of the January 6 defendants, while openly supporting the violent BLM riots of 2020, showcases a complete disregard for her duty of impartiality and the rule of law, he continued. I mean, I've never seen Butthead and Matt Gaetz in the same room at the same time, so... Justice may be blind, but the American people are not. We see Judge Chutkan for her actions, and we rebuke them in the greatest possible sense. The resolution lists several examples of statements made, sentences handed down, and actions taken by Chutkan, according to Gaetz, call into question her integrity and independence and present impropriety or the appearance of impropriety. This is all well and good. This is the proper response to have in a situation like this, when you actually have recorded legitimate proof of Chutkan being biased and handing down sentences where the prosecution asked for none. Handing down jail time when the prosecution asked for a fine and nothing more. Here is my problem with this. Matt Gaetz, this is for you. My problem with this is this. Why are you just doing this now? Especially coming from you, Matt Gaetz. Matt Gaetz, you have been one of the biggest advocates, and I'm sure that it was just all for show, because you were doing it hanging around with the plant Marjorie Taylor Greene. But you were one of the biggest advocates for the rights of the people who were locked up for the January 6th Selfie Fest. Nobody was a bigger friend to the people who were involved in this than one Matthew Gaetz who looks like Butthead. And oddly enough, Luke Bryan at the same time. Why are you just doing this now? Would you, by the way, have left these people to rot in their jail sentences that their prosecutors didn't even recommend if Chutkin hadn't been the one that was assigned to this case? Would you have ignored their pleas, their plight? Or Chutkin's bias? If somebody else on that bench had been the one who just conveniently was appointed to this case? It's the right action. Don't get me wrong, Matt Gaetz. It is, but I think you're full of shit. Because you're doing this now when it's a big target while all the little people suffered. The Republican lawmaker also mentions a bizarre rant that Chutkin went on October 2021, during which she opined people gathered all over the country last year to protest the violent murder by the police of an unarmed man, to compare the actions of people protesting mostly peacefully for civil rights to those of a violent mob seeking to overthrow the lawfully elected government is a false equivalency and ignores the very real danger that the January 6th riot posed to the foundation of our hegemony. Again, I like the action. I like the fact that you're doing this. But this is like 2 years too late, Matt Gaetz. Like, you should have been doing this 2 years ago already. The debate news. Something we've all been talking about all over the weekend, except for me, because I had to work on Saturday and I had an insomnia attack on Friday night, and I slept. Legitimately, I got home from work at like 4 and watched an episode of Home Improvement and passed out on the couch and stayed there for 13 hours. I was just a little bit tired. From CNN, though, Trump confirms he will not participate in first GOP debate, teases possibly skipping more. From Kristen Holmes. Former President Trump confirmed on Sunday he will not participate in the first Republican primary debate this week, stating that the public already knows who I am. Trump wrote on a social media platform, "I will therefore not be doing the debates." It was not immediately clear whether Trump meant he will sit out all currently scheduled debates. There is a second GOP primary debate set for September, or any and all future debates. A Trump advisor told CNN the former president could still decide to participate in a later primary debate despite his post. I wouldn't if I was him. Trump has also told a number of allies he does not want to debate at the Reagan Library, the location of the second debate, and complained in private conversations that he was never invited to speak at the venue, blaming in part the chairman of the board of trustees, Fred Ryan. Ryan was the chief executive officer of the Washington Post, where democracy goes to die in darkness. Wednesday's primary debate is the first of the 2024 cycle. For weeks, the former president has privately and publicly floated skipping it. Given his lead in the polls, multiple sources familiar with Trump's plans previously told CNN he's planning to sit for an interview with Tucker Carlson instead. Still, Republican officials had been publicly seeking to convince Trump to join the debate stage as recently as Sunday morning. Think of the ratings! Look at the ratings here! So, and I'm going to skip ahead on this one. And I just want to talk about what Viva Frei had to say about this, and where Viva is right and where he didn't go far enough on this. But Viva Frei posted on X on Saturday. At first I thought it was wrong of Trump to skip the primary debates next week. Avoiding public debate in election is very rarely the righteous thing to do, and I think that Trump does have questions that he needs to answer as far as his response with the pinko pox. Questions that ought to come from political rivals, not a comfortable sit-down with a journalist. That said, Trump is currently facing 4 of the biggest steaming pile of judicial dogshit indictments imaginable. We all know damn well intelligence, FBI, DOJ would be watching the debates, hoping to catch Trump in something that they would then try to use against him in any of the 4 steaming pile of judicial dogshit indictments. Perjury. He technically wouldn't be qualified for perjury, by the way, for anything he said on the debate stage, because he's not under oath up there. Inciting further insurrection or seditious conspiracy, anything. Now, see, that actually may fly, because the mainstream media will twist literally anything he says into a dog whistle of, oh, he said that he likes to eat coconut cream pie. That's code for go and attack the White House. He's dog whistling to all his supporters. If you were to call Pence a traitor or accuse him of dereliction of duty, would Pence claim witness intimidation and try to have Trump locked up? That's actually a legitimate possibility. I know Fry puts up the laughing emoji when he puts that up there, but that's actually a legitimate concern. Like, that is a thing that could possibly happen. The reality is that it's not just unwise for Trump to participate in a debate with at least one potential witness, it would also be illegally reckless to do so, which I suspect is part and parcel of the abuse of prosecution in the first place to frustrate his ability to properly campaign, and which I suspect might be fueling some of his opportunistic critique against him. Some people want to see him make a mistake so they can exploit it for their own primary campaigns, or exploit his inability to campaign as freely as he might have otherwise done. My unsolicited 2 cents. I'm going to take that a step further than what Viva Fry took this. Donald Trump would be an absolute moron to get on that stage with number 1 Mike Pence, and Viva Fry touched perfectly on why it would be one of the dumbest things possible for him to get on the stage with Mike Pence. It's because Mike Pence is, as Fry pointed out, a potential witness. Somebody who is potentially going to be speaking at his trial. And yeah, all it takes is little Mike, disloyal Mike. Oh my God, it's witness intimidation. What is he doing? Is he calling for his supporters to come back and build a gallows that nobody saw people take the material from out in front of Mike Pence's house again? Oh my God, oh my jumping Jesus. Look at what it is that he's saying. Oh my God, it's the worst thing in the world. Look at him. But furthermore, all the indictments are public. All the conditions of release are public. All the judge's decisions on what's happening with the trial are public, which means that all 4 of the lawyers who are going to be on the stage with the Donald, when he goes up there to speak, know exactly what is in all of these criminal indictments, all these bonds, all these agreements of release, and everything else. Which means they are going to sit up there. And the moderators on top of that. I don't trust the Fox News moderators on top of this, but the moderators on top of it are going out here with a PhD level of knowledge of what's in these conditions of release, waiting to come out and try to say something to trip him up, to try to get him to say something that'll be a violation of his conditions of release. Again, perjury is not the big danger with this, because he's not going to be under oath at the debate. Trust me, if Trump had been under oath at any debate, he'd already be in jail for perjury. Trust me when I say that one. But with this, Ron DeSantis, hey, why don't you go back and tell us what's who you know about that's a witness in this here? Who is you have to worry about? Hey, don't you think that Mike Pence is being a little bit edgy towards you? Why don't you retaliate against him? Mr. Trump, would you like to directly respond to Mr. Pence? And that's just some extreme examples of some of the things that can be levied against him. If I was his lawyers, I would say, you don't dare step on that stage. If you step on that stage, we are done. Go hire a new lawyer. Do I think that the world would be better off with a debate of Donald? Oh, yes, absolutely. But you've got 4 lawyers sitting up there whose only shot at the presidency at all is Donald Trump being in a prison cell. And all 4 of those lawyers have been opportunistic grifters since they came into the public eye. So no, you would not catch me dead if I was under criminal indictment on that stage. Fuck that. Some more presidential news. Some Ramaswamy news, actually. A few stories about Vivek in a row. Mogwai says he needs to wait until the line isn't as long as the train line at Lindsey Graham's house. From the Daily Wire, Nikki Haley bashes Ramaswamy for saying he'd cut aid to Israel. From Hank Berrien. No video, unfortunately. We do have video, though, coming up. Former UN ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, who is running for the Republican presidential nomination, slammed fellow G candidate Vivek Ramaswamy for saying he would cut aid to Israel by 2028 if he were elected president. Yeah, you can't really go after our greatest ally on a stage full of neocons and expect to get anywhere. Israel received nearly $4 billion a year in military aid from the US, and Ben Shapiro just started salivating. But nearly all of it, with the exception of loan guarantees, which didn't cost the American taxpayer anything, is used for credits that are sent directly to the Pentagon to US weapons manufacturers in addition. Israeli intelligence works closely with U.S. gathering intelligence not only in the Middle East but also in Russia, Central Asia, and other foreign countries. Speaking to Russell Brand, Ramaswamy said he would expand the historic Abraham Accords, which cemented relations between Israel on one side and the UAE, Bahrain, Morocco, and Sudan, and broker peace between Israel and the countries such as Qatar, Oman, and Indonesia. Oman! Really, it's got to be that one? That's a bad joke, by the way. Qatar has funded Israel's arch-enemy Hamas, which has called for Israel's destruction and has also funded the Taliban and Islamists in Syria. If the Abraham Accords can be strengthened, Ramaswamy said, the military aid to Israel won't be necessary in order to have the kind of stability that we'd actually have in the Middle East by having Israel more integrated in with its partners. While the relationships with Israel has advanced American interests, he said, it should not get special treatment. Yeah, that is absolutely not going to go over well with people the likes of Nimrata Haley. Haley pushed back on Ramaswamy's position in a statement on Monday. Vivek Ramaswamy is completely wrong to call for ending America's special bond with Israel, Haley said in a statement. Support for Israel is both the morally right and strategically smart thing to do. Both countries are stronger and safer because of our ironclad friendship. As president, I will never abandon Israel. Of course you won't. Of course you won't. Haley noted that Ramaswamy had also suggested that he would abandon Taiwan to communist China if America were no longer reliant on Taiwan for semiconductors. Ramaswamy told radio host Hugh Hewitt last week, I'm being very clear, Xi Jinping should not mess with Taiwan until we have achieved semiconductor independence. Until the end of my first term, when I will lead us there, and after that our commitments to Taiwan, our commitments to be willing to go to military conflict will change after that because it's rationally in our self-interest. Now, see, I like some of this idea and some of what's coming here from Ramaswamy, but I'm going to tell you right off the bat, that does not play well with the independent voter, who is not going to give him a lot of slack and is honestly going to more likely stay on Nikki Haley's side, especially over Israel, who most of these people only know as, hey, that's where Jesus was walking around. We gotta protect them. That's where Jesus was. They couldn't find it on a map to save their lives, but they know that. All right. I've got some video of Jim Acosta having a conversation with Ramaswamy. Oh, and my Instagram feed just ended. I wonder if they put in... No, they couldn't have put in the strict hour mark here because we're over an hour on the recording for that because I started that at the same time as I started this. But yeah, Instagram just cut off, unfortunately. So sorry to the Instagram viewers for that. If I'd known that, I'd at least given you a sign off at some point here. But we'll go with the rest of this here. Jim Acosta, during my interview with Ramaswamy, he reiterated his position that he would allow Putin to keep parts of Ukraine, block Ukraine from joining NATO, and even visit Putin in Moscow. The GOP contender added, our goal should not be for Putin to lose. And I'm going to step away. I'll still have my headset on so I can still hear it. But I got to step up from my desk for just a second while we are listening to this. So let's get this started.
And you've also suggested that Vladimir Putin be allowed to keep parts of Ukraine as part of a way to solve that conflict. What if he wants parts of Poland?
You leave
next?
out the most important part of that deal.
More of Ukraine next.
Aren't
you letting some of these authoritarian leaders off the hook?
What actually advances? Far from it. I think that the Biden administration is so stubbornly attached to the idea of getting Xi Jinping to drop Vladimir Putin. What I think we need to be doing is get Vladimir Putin to drop Xi Jinping. Just like Nixon went to China in 1972, I think Putin is like the new Mao. I will visit Moscow, and I will pull Russia out of its military alliance with China. The Russia-China military alliance is the single greatest military threat that we face today. Hypersonic missile capabilities, nuclear capabilities in Russia, far ahead of us or China. A naval capacity in China ahead of ours, combined with an economy that we depend on for our modern way of life. Those two nations are in a military alliance with one another, and nobody in either political party is talking about it. Worst of all, our engagement in Ukraine is further driving Russia into China's arms. So my foreign policy centers on weakening that alliance. That advances American interests.
But you would let Putin have
that
parts
is how
of
we
Ukraine.
actually secure peace.
But you would let Putin have parts of
I
Ukraine.
would freeze the current lines. I would freeze the current lines of control, and that would leave parts of the Donbass region with Russia. I would also further make a commitment that NATO will not admit Ukraine to NATO. But there are even greater wins that I will get for the United States in return. The top of the list. No, our goal should not be for Putin to lose. Our goal should be for America to win. That's what we have forgotten in this country, is that driving Russia into the ground is not a U.S. strategic goal.
And of course, Acosta cuts him off after this point because he got a soundbite. Our goal should not be for Russia to lose, which, again, does not play well with the independent who has been convinced for the last let's go back and be realistic about this, who's been convinced since 2015 that Russia is the great evil of the world. Basically, the 80s called and they want their foreign policy back. And no, the goal shouldn't be to make Putin lose and lose everything. The goal should be, and Vivek is actually completely wrong on this, the goal should be to stop people from dying. To find a compromise somewhere. And, I mean, I don't know what Jim Acosta actually believes, but he is paid to spread the idea that any concession anywhere to Russia is equivalent to Russia winning the whole thing. If a square mile of Ukraine is given to Russia in pittance for him leaving people like Acosta will spread the propaganda that means that Russia won. We can't let Russia win, even over 1 square mile. And a part of the problem is that they need this war to go on forever. There can't be any talk of a compromise and ending. I think the Donbass should be given over to whatever it is that they want to do. And again, while the mainstream media won't cover this definitely, I have heard numerous rumors, and I've not been able to independently confirm it myself, that the Donbass had put a petition in to declare independence from Kiev, and Kiev said, "No, fuck you. You stay." Which, I mean, if that's true, then that most likely means that they probably petitioned Russia right after that and said, "You help us get away from Kiev. We want independence. We will be vassal state if need be, but we want independence." By the way, another one that's on the stack for tomorrow, we'll be talking about the fact that the State Department is urging U.S. citizens to get out of Belarus. So we'll be talking about that probably tomorrow. From the Hill, Ramaswamy on the VP slot. "I'm not interested in a different position in the government," from Nick Robertson. Vivek Ramaswamy said he would turn down an offer for the vice presidency if he doesn't win the nomination for 2024, which, by the way, is part of the reason that I think that he's not even serious about the campaign. I think he is legitimately looking to sell books and get his name out there, or use his popularity to start a business and get a lot of people to go out and buy what he is, because, I mean, the guy's an entrepreneur to begin with. "I'm not interested in a different position in the government," he said in a Fox News interview on Saturday. "Frankly, I'd drive change through the private sector sooner than becoming a number 2 or number 3 in the federal government." "Donald Trump and I share something in common, and that is that neither of us would do well in a number 2 position," he added. Well, they make special medicines and stuff that tastes like chocolate that can help you with that. If you're having a problem in a number 2 position. The remarks echo other candidates like Nikki Haley, who has also stated no interest in being the second in command. "I think everybody that says she's doing this to be vice president needs to understand I don't run for second," Haley said this week. "Well, you should probably drop out then, because, well, you're probably running for 5th or 6th at this point." The Ohio businessman has shot up in the polls since entering the field as a political unknown. He's placed 2nd in some state polls and is 3rd among a crowded group of candidates, according to national polling averages. He's even drawn shots from Ron DeSantis, whose super PAC debate prep memo said the Florida governor should take a sledgehammer to Ramaswamy from the stage at the first GOP debate next week. Yeah, that'll be fantastic for somebody who's already hemorrhaging supporters. Take a shot at the brown guy, who is doing fantastically in the polls, by the way. But he is running for the presidency and apparently nothing else. Let's talk Hunter. The live chat's back up here. Guys, don't be shy. Mogwai's not shy. From the New York Post, Hunter Biden's lawyers threatened to put president on the stand, per a report from Patrick Riley. Hunter's lawyers warned prosecutors last year the defense would put the president on the stand to testify in his son's defense if criminal charges were ever brought against him, according to a report, which would be nigh impossible because the president has diplomatic immunity. I'm sorry, executive immunity. He's got diplomatic immunity too, but he's got executive immunity. Hunter's lawyer, Chris Clark, wrote a letter to prosecutors last October after news leaked that federal agents had enough evidence to charge the first son with illegally buying a firearm while still using crack. Clark said that the DOJ charged Hunter, the defense would be forced to put the commander-in-chief on the witness stand. President Biden now unquestionably be a fact witness for the defense in any criminal trial, Clark wrote in a 32-page letter obtained by Politico. Yeah, that would go over well. Number one, a large handful of things that Biden can't talk about because of executive privilege. Number two, a large amount of things that Biden can't talk about because he can't formulate the words. And number three, a clear shot in position, which will be partially blocked, of course, by executive privilege, but of the prosecution having a chance to cross. See, you can come out and talk a big game about this, but I think that would backfire in your face. The email, along with additional 300 pages of emails reviewed by the outlet, give a new unreported insight into how Hunter's sweet plea deal, which would have kept him out of prison, fell apart at the seams last month. The younger Biden, 53, pled not guilty to federal tax and gun charges in Delaware on July 26th after the deal, which was bashed by congressional Republicans for its leniency, was pulled by District Judge Mary Ellen Noriega. And now I'm very curious to see where this does wind up getting tried. Of course, but yeah, I don't think putting Joe on the stand would have turned out the way that you wanted to. I think that was a bluff. All right, let's talk about China. Evergrande says improved internal control may address listing rules. So Evergrande is in a little bit of trouble right now. I'm actually going to skip this one. I want to talk about the bankruptcy specifically. From CNN, Evergrande's bankruptcy may be just the beginning of China's real estate crisis, which, by the way, is something that you should be paying attention to. You absolutely should be paying attention to this because if China's economy goes down, so does ours. And that is a sad fact of life that we need to move ourselves out of, if we possibly can. From Allison Morrow. Evergrande's U.S. bankruptcy serves as a cautionary tale about the growth at all costs model that underpinned China's spectacular growth over the past 30 years. For decades, Evergrande, once one of China's most successful real estate developers, gobbled up debt. As China's economy exploded, demand for housing was so strong, home builders often pre-sold apartment units to buyers before construction was complete. But a sudden shift in policy by China's leaders 2 years ago has left the country's property developers scrambling for cash, compounding financial risks within the world's second largest economy. The story of Evergrande's downfall began in 2021, when the central government's move to curb excessive borrowing to try to slow the rise in home prices, effectively cutting off a major source of funding for property developers. Evergrande, which had a $300 billion in liabilities, couldn't shore up cash fast enough to make its debt payments. It defaulted in December 2021, triggering a market panic. A wave of defaults followed, and China's vast real estate market has yet to recover. Building was suspended on dozens of projects, leaving many pre-sale buyers left with no new home and a hefty debt burden. What happens next as it tries to restructure billions of dollars in offshore debts has massive implications for China's financial systems. Evergrande filed on Thursday for Chapter 15, which is a way for foreign companies to use U.S. bankruptcy law to restructure debt. This process will take time, as Evergrande has roughly $19 billion in offshore debts. Evergrande's liquidity crisis was just the beginning of the pain. Other large builders in China have since defaulted, as they struggle to shore up cash and demand for housing has fallen, and part of that is because a lot of them are tied into Evergrande as well. Now investors around the world are watching nervously as Country Garden, which employs some 300,000 people, missed 2 payments on its multi-billion-dollar debt and said it was considering various debt management measures. The cash-strapped developer's debt is now seen as a very high-risk asset, according to Moody's, which downgraded its rating on Country Garden last week. It's hard to overstate the importance of property market in China. The industry accounts for as much as 30% of the country's economic activity. And more than 2/3 of household wealth is tied up in real estate. Well, part of that is because you can't own really anything else in China. But nearly 3 years of zero COVID restrictions sapped China's economic growth, and consumers have been reluctant to buy new homes in the face of higher unemployment and falling property values. After a brief surge in activity this year, China's economic engines have been sputtering. Consumer prices last month fell for the first time in more than 2 years. Youth unemployment has been rising so fast, China's authorities simply don't release the July data. Retail sales, export demand, and factory production are all down. Can Beijing bail these companies out? It's unlikely. While Beijing has made some efforts to help jumpstart demand for housing and free up cash for developers, the days of big state-funded bailouts for bloated industries appear to be over. As President, let me try that one again. As President Xi Jinping said in a recent speech, "We must maintain historic patience and insist on making steady step-by-step progress." Now, Beijing can't bail us out because they don't have the cash or the assets to do so. Now, a question to ask here is this a part of the reason now that they're taking such a focus on Taiwan, which has a booming economy and is technically a part of the mainland, except for the fact that the legitimate government of China is what went to Taiwan instead of the other way around. But to come in and gobble up that industry and parasitize it to try to prop up what is failing out of theirs, to try to pull themselves back up out of the top of the market above the US. And that is a possibility, but yeah, if you start to see a tanking in Chinese economy, then you're going to start to see a tanking in our economy too. So that is something to watch for. All right, let's do some crime and punishment. From Fox News, D.C. continues experiencing soaring crime rates despite council chairman saying there is no crime crisis. I don't see any crime crisis, do you? Do you see the carjackings and the shootings and the violent murders and the beatings and everything? I don't see anything. That joke is not going to make sense on the audio platform. From Joe Schaufstall. DC's crime rates have continued to skyrocket despite its city council chairman proclaiming earlier this year there's no crime crisis around the nation's capital. Democrat DC Council Chairman Phil Mendelson told the House Committee on Oversight late March that while there are considerable concerns regarding crime, residents should not worry. With regard to crime, yes, there's considerable concern, Mendelson said, but while perception is important, the reality is less concerning. Let me be clear. People should feel safe, and it's a problem that many residents of the district don't. I know this belies the common belief when it comes to crime, how people feel it is important. But there's not a crime crisis in D.C. The hearing came after months of disputes between Congress and the D.C. Council over crime proposals. It also occurred just days after a staff member for Rand Paul was severely injured after being stabbed by a man who had recently been released from prison. But months after his comments from the March hearing, crime statistics paint a much different picture than Mendelson's reassurances about the reality of where the city stands. Of course they do. You had years of ACAB Cops that are afraid that if they do something about the crime, they're going to wind up on the next viral video and go to prison for literally nothing. And more people realizing that they can get away with it, gathering up into these cities like this. Of course you have a crime problem. I'd be surprised if you didn't. But no, just keep telling your people, no, there's no problem. I don't see anything. I got one from the other side of the country here. A Californian was killed after an argument over a pride flag hanging outside her clothing store, deputies say. From Andy Rose and Alicia Ibrahimji. There we go. A SoCal clothing store owner was shot and killed after an argument about a rainbow pride flag hanging outside her business, police said, as the LGBTQI-RAMI-GIXTBYAEIOU sometimes Y community continues to face violence and threats across America. Lori Carlton, 66, died from a gunshot wound Friday evening at her store, mag.pi, in Cedar Glen, about 80 miles by car east of LA, the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office said. The suspected shooter is also dead following a lethal force encounter with deputies as the suspect ran away after the shooting, authorities said. Oh, so he won't be able to testify against this, or in his own defense, or in his own prosecution. In fact, we will know nothing except for what the media tells us about this particular suspect. Isn't that weird? Hey, this is the second person who's had a run-in with a notable Democrat who is weirdly never going to be able to testify. Isn't that weird? Detectives learned the suspect made several disparaging remarks about a rainbow flag that stood outside the store before shooting Carlton. The release said investigators haven't identified the suspect. No deputies were hurt in the encounter. The attack comes as the LGBTQI-RAMIGIXTBYAEIOU sometimes Y people and their supporters have faced threats and acts of violence alongside an unprecedented wave of anti-alphabet legislation in 2023, according to the Human Rights Council, which totally was coming out of California. California is the most homophobic place in the country, right? My next question here is, during the standoff, right before the guy shot the woman, did he wave his gun around in the air and scream, "This is MAGA country"? Or did he scream that when the deputies came in and played the heroes and shot the man without taking any other opportunity to subdue? Again, an unidentified assailant who will never be able to testify in his own trial. Isn't that weird? An unidentified right-winger who will never be able to testify to what happened with this. That's so weird. It's like that never happens. Speaking of guns, from the New York Post. By the way, in one of the most restrictive gun areas in the country, again, from the New York Post, by the way, on this one. Biden admin crackdown on legal gun dealers leads to 350% rise in license loss. From Mary Kay Ling. Gun dealers are crying foul as the Biden admin pursues apparent crackdown on legal firearm sellers whose licenses have been revoked at an unprecedented rate over the last 2 years. Yeah, don't you just hate it when the government picks winners and losers? The policy is designed to be a backdoor violation of the Second Amendment. Anthony Navarro, a Greeley, Colorado dealer who just lost his license last year, told the Wall Street Journal. The ATF has taken away the licenses of 122 dealers since October, up from just 27 revocations in all of fiscal year 2021. a 350% increase in the first 9 months of this fiscal year alone. Dealers complained that many of the violations leading to the loss of their businesses amount to little more than paperwork errors. Navarro, for example, said he informed the ATF immediately when he found that a lax employee had been mishandling buyers' purchase documents and lost his license as a result. Leslie Gifford of Breckington, Kansas, who legally sold guns as a sideline for more than 30 years, has had his license pulled for selling a firearm to a concealed carry holder from Nebraska who should have been shopping in his own home state. Mr. Biden wants to get rid of all of us little dealers, Gifford said. In a recently filed suit, North Dakota gun store Bridge City Ordnance alleged that the ATF's newly strict inspection policy is being wielded as a political weapon. Did you expect anything different? But the Biden admin's approach could backfire as gun dealers threaten to stop informing federal authorities about suspicious buyers in retaliation. Oh man, I can't imagine that goes over well. The gun dealers were our first line of defense against gun trafficking, said Peter Forcelli, a retired ATF Deputy Assistant Director. Why are we now beating an ally into submission? Gun control advocates cheered on the clampdown. We've taken steps to hold accountable these few dealers who are engaging in these willful violations, ATF Director Steve Dettelbach said. They're not going to have the privilege of being a gun dealer anymore. So, and I want to talk just about that for a second. What this retired ATF Deputy Assistant Director said. So, somebody comes into your shop. You notice something suspicious about the dude. And the last person who had an error in paperwork somewhere lost his license. Are you going to be right there ready to go back and tell the ATF about the suspicious dude that you denied the gun purchase to in your shop? I wouldn't. If the suspicious dude came in, I mean, at that point, I would just tell him to get the F lost. If it's somebody that I couldn't trust right off the bat of seeing the NICS, yeah, I'm not going to tell the ATF that you were in here trying to buy a gun. But get the hell out of here. I'm not going to run your background check. You creep me out. Or any number of other issues that come up with this. On top of the fact, of course, that the Biden admin is choosing winners and losers. And the winners are probably going to be bigger corporate donors who have other streams of revenue, of course. Speaking of persecution, political style, of course, fired founder of right-wing organization Project Veritas is under investigation in New York. Because of course he is. From Michael R. Sisak. The founder of Veritas, a conservative nonprofit known for its hidden camera stings, is under investigation by suburban New York prosecutor's office in the latest fallout after his ouster from the group over allegations that he mistreated workers and misspent organization funds. Where is he being investigated in? Oh, suburban New York. That would be under Letitia James's jurisdiction, oddly enough. The Westchester County District Attorney's Office confirmed on Friday It's looking into matters concerning James O'Keefe, who was suspended in February and later fired as chairman and CEO. Project Veritas board as president. The board has said he spent an excessive amount of donor funds on personal luxuries. Jin Wang, a spokesperson for Mimi Roca, declined to discuss the subject or details the investigation, or what potential charges, if any, O'Keefe could face. That's because they're not done making them up yet. Wang cautioned that the investigations can have a variety of outcomes, not necessarily resulting in criminal charges. Gee, that's weird. So, we've got the 1, 2, 3, 4 indictments of Donald Trump, a full indictment of everybody who was in his inner circle in Georgia. And now we have an investigation into James O'Keefe while gun dealers are losing their licenses. Left and right. You still think this is about the rule of law and justice? And not political retribution? Some sad news out of New York. Driver plows into at least 7 pedestrians at New York City crosswalk in bloody hit and run from Joe Marino and David Proper. That's railroad track suspended. So we're gonna not do that one here. But we will look at some of the awful pictures of this. A vehicle plowed through 7 pedestrians at a Midtown Manhattan crosswalk late Sunday, leaving at least 1 critically injured, according to police and law enforcement sources. The driver of an Accord hit the 7 victims around 11:55 p.m. at the West 36th Street and 6th Avenue and kept driving to Queens Midtown Tunnel, sources said. 5 pedestrians were rushed to Bellevue, with at least 1 person in critical condition, sources said. Unnamed sources, of course. Damn. They had to blot out the blood just for sensors. Another victim was in stable condition and was taken to a different hospital. 1 victim refused medical attention, sources said. A 29-year-old female person of interest was later taken into custody after she was involved in a 3-car crash in the Long Island Expressway at the Clearview Expressway in Queens, sources said. So this doesn't appear to have any terroristic issues at all. This doesn't appear to have any open malice, I should say. I kind of question whether or not this woman was drunk when she did this, or high or something else, but this, this is horrendous, regardless. And you hate to see it for seeing these people. I make fun of New Yorkers all the time, but I still want everybody to be safe as they can be. Texas, having some more problems again. Texas urges residents to cut power usage as prices surge. From Sarah Higdon, friend of the show, by the way. On Thursday, the Electric Reliability Council for Texas issued a voluntary conservation notice because it was expecting extreme temperatures after issuing an ERCOT weather watch on August 12th. In a statement posted to X, the state's grid operators said that due to extreme temperatures, forecasted high demands and lower reserves due to low wind generations, Texans are asked to voluntarily reduce electric use if safe to do so. The company gives energy-saving tips on the website during summer. Raise your thermostat by a degree or 2, avoid using large appliances, turn off and unplug non-essential lights and appliances, and set pool pumps to run early morning or overnight, it states. ERCOT lists a voluntary notice as its level 3 of 4 with an emergency alert being the highest risk, where it may have to issue controlled outages to deal with extremely low energy reserves. The company says they issue a weather watch alert to give a 3 to 5 day look ahead for possible higher demand due to forecasted conditions. It says voluntary conservation notice is a call for Texans to reduce energy uses during peak demand periods. Where safe to do so, conservation is a common tool used throughout the industry to support grid reliability. Now, I question at this point why Texas has not fixed its grid yet to get to a point where they don't have to do this. I understand there are a lot of people in Texas, I do. And I understand that it gets hot as balls in Texas, I do. But there's got to be, like, you're not building an infrastructure that's tantamount to the amount of people that you have in your state. And I know that you want to come back out and draw more. And realistically, I mean, we should be looking for ways to reduce our energy usage as we can. I definitely try to do that as I go. It's realistic and it's a fact, and we should be absolutely trying to do that. But to have the government coming out and telling you, hey, this is what you should do, tells me that there are bigger problems still in the Texas infrastructure that should be addressed. I mean, come on, Abbott. You've done so well on so many other things. And a little bit of foreign news, and I think that's going to be it for the night tonight. From CNN, Zelensky hails historic supply of F-16s as Ukraine seeks to counter Russian air supremacy. From Benjamin Brown and Yulia Kisaeva. Yes, apparently they're not going to have just the MiG-22s anymore. The Netherlands and Denmark will provide Ukraine with a much sought-after F-16 fighter in an agreement hailed by President Zelensky as historic. Kiev has urgently been calling on its Western allies to provide it with US-made aircraft as its slow-moving counteroffensive is hampered by Russian air superiority. Speaking in a joint press conference with Zelensky at Eindhoven Airport on Sunday, Prime Minister Mark Rutte said his country would commit to delivering F-16 aircraft to Ukraine once the conditions for such a transfer have been met. Zelensky has hailed the agreement as historic and the most important one yet. The Netherlands became the first country to agree to provide the Ukraine with F-16s after training. I am very grateful, he added. Even with the news, it will take months until Ukraine will be able to use the jets. On Monday, Zelensky said on X that Ukraine would receive 42 F-16 from the Netherlands and 19 from Denmark. However, the Dutch government has not yet publicly confirmed the number of jets it would provide. Rutte said his country, which is currently in the process of upgrading to the newer F-35s, had 42 F-16s in its arsenal. At this moment, the Netherlands still owns 42 F-16s. Out of these 42, we need planes to help training in Denmark and later in Romania, Rutte said. He added the Netherlands would look into whether all of the remaining planes could be supplied, but stated that he could not yet give a definitive number. The Netherlands, a NATO member, has been a strong ally to Ukraine since well before Russia's full-scale invasion began in February of 2022. So, I guess my concern has always been, of course, number one, I mean, Zelensky has been, if you give a mouse a cookie, from the very, very beginning of all this. And we have thrown countless numbers of weapons, of Stinger missiles, of rounds, of bullets, of things that our citizens cannot put their hands on. Over and over and over and over and over again. And he keeps asking for more and more. My biggest concern, of course, with the transfer of the F-16s is this, when they say counteroffensive, is this going to be where they go back in and start hammering back on Russian soil? Because, I mean, it really seems more and more at this point like this has stopped being a defensive maneuver a defensive situation. And that's been bothering me for a long time. And I know that Zelensky will throw every last Ukrainian male into the meat grinder until he is the last one left. Which, I mean, imagine the harem that you'll have after that point. To keep this war going for as long as humanly possible, and will not even think about a compromise. And of course, his allies in DC will do the same thing. And like we saw with Jim Acosta and Vivek Ramaswamy earlier, will legitimately call you a bad person if you even talk about the idea of a compromise or a solution somewhere along the lines that doesn't involve Vladimir Putin getting, at the very least, completely kicked out and ceding all of his territory in the Ukraine. And by the way, I think a lot of these people are going full on with the Ukraine takeover of Moscow and all of Russia. I don't know how they would ever consider to pull it off, but I mean, I've seen some of these leftoids on Twitter with the Ukrainian flag in their bio advocate for the murder of Putin and for Kiev to go into Moscow. It's time to sit down at the table and say, how can we end this? How can we stop people dying? But nobody here seems to have any interest in doing so. And that is where we end the news for the night. Now, I did say at the top of the show that we'd go with a review of the live chat, but I think I've gone over all the live chat throughout this. I think the only thing that I haven't done was Mogwai said at 1927 he needs to wait until the line isn't as long as the train line at the Lindsey Graham house. Otherwise, yeah, I mean, I've been through everything that we need to get through here, so I think we're going to call it a night. Well, it's been interesting. Got a lot of stuff done. We've got some more stuff to carry over for tomorrow, definitely. I am going to take some time and catch back up on the audio platform because after my microphone mistake on Thursday, I do want to make sure that we're doing well again and we're actually coming up and making everything work here. But yeah, let's throw some outro music up and let's head out of here. Where is my outro music? There it is. All right, so with that, we're done. We're out of here for the night. Thank you, everybody who came by and chatted and hung out in the live chat. Or everybody who came by and lurked. We had some lurkers come throughout here, but we'll be back here tomorrow with more news, more headlines, more contemporary. We'll probably be talking about, well, I know some of the things we'll be talking about. We'll be talking about Trump's bond. I know that's in there. The demand from the State Department to get everybody out of Belarus. Probably what's happened. Like, I don't know. I know that the bond was set. I saw some of that over my shoulder in this. I don't know if this means that we have the arrest, if we have the mugshot, or anything else that's going on with that. I will be checking into that after we go. And a host of other things here, including a Georgia teacher firing, Georgia school board firing a teacher for reading a book to class. We'll be talking about that. Some Muslim news here, and some of the stuff that we weren't able to catch up with on Friday. So stick around, come back and join me here for all of that and more over here on Contemporary. If you are on Twitch, stick around. We are going to go find somebody to raid. Take care. Have a good night. We will see you tomorrow for more news, more headlines, and more Contemporary. And until tomorrow, I am Jay Edgar, and this is Contemporary.